everyone. My name is Lisa Clay, and I work with the Teaching, Learning, and Engagement Division here at FSU Libraries. I'm happy to welcome you to the Dual Citizenship, Navigating the Digital Realm panel. We're joined by a number of faculty and students. I'll start just down the line. First is Morgan Young. She's an undergraduate in environmental science on the pre-med track. Next is Kameja Ayers, an undergraduate in education. Next is Ariana Broad, welcome. Our graduate student in biological sciences.
I'm actually an undergrad.
Oh, congratulations. Cool. And then I have Dr. Vanessa Demmin, Professor of Instructional Systems and Learning Technologies, and Dr. Deanna Rollinger, Associate Dean of Faculty Development and Community Engagement and Professor of Sociology, and Dr. John Crow, our Instructional Specialist in the Office of Distance Learning. All right, and I'm happy to pass the mic off to our moderator, Jeff Phillips, Social Sciences Librarian. Thanks so much.
Awesome. And I want to welcome everyone for coming. Also welcome to our online community and all future watchers who will be watching this in the future. We have a great panel today. I'm going to start off with some questions. We'll do 45 minutes of questions and then 15 minutes where you can provide questions as well. So it won't just be the scripted questions up here. Of course, this is a panel I'm super excited about, and I think we have an amazing group of panelists. So we'll start off, since this is digital citizenship. Let's start off, and I'll start with you, Morgan. How do you define digital citizenship, and how does it relate to your coursework at the university? And there's a mic right there.
So for me, I think digital citizenship is just the overall decorum that you have when taking online classes, you know, the integrity that you keep with yourself and that accountability. And I think that applies for me, like the 3 classes that I've taken online, and just how, like I said, the accountability that I had when taking those courses, because you are so self-sufficient with those. Yeah, so I think that's for me.
Fantastic, and we'll just go down the line. Kameja, and I'll ask the question a few times in case people start getting mixed up with what question we are. How do you define digital citizenship?
Me personally, I define digital citizenship through the community that's built within the online course, because to me, community is like one of the #1 things, because it's like we aren't seeing each other face to face, so it's kind of like we're isolated a little bit into like our own little box where it's like we can express ourselves independently and individually, but we still need that sense of like togetherness, because we're all taking the course, we're all trying to achieve this one thing of passing that course and learning the curriculum that's within that course. So, yeah.
I would define digital citizenship as, I guess, similar to what you consider citizenship. So you have a responsibility and a duty to whatever you belong to, and digital citizenship, that would be the course. So you are basically responsible for the duties, which is discussing and being an active participant in the course. And this can look like many different ways depending on how it's laid out, fully online, hybrid, etc. So.
Fantastic. Here's a mic right here too.
Oh, I was trying to pull really hard.
I think my response will hit on a number of the same notes. I always like to remove the term digital first and just think about what it means to be a citizen, because we go around in life thinking about ourselves a lot of the time, and and I am a citizen, but in order to be a citizen, you are then part of a group. You need to think about that group. You need to think about who we are collectively, not just what my needs are, but what our needs are, and how we can come together to be a group that supports each other, make sure that everybody's needs get met, make sure that we can acknowledge our differences. Sometimes we have different needs or different preferences or different tolerances, and being able to work together through all of that, whether that is in the face-to-face setting or if it's in the online setting. It can be a little more challenging to see that sometimes in the online setting, just because we have what's called transactional distance. We don't have those direct sight lines with each other. We don't see all of the gestures and facial expressions and all the bodies sitting in the classroom, but it's still there, and to me that's a critical part of our online learning experience. And actually everything we do online at this university, because as we're talking about this in classes, I'm also thinking about what is my responsibility as a faculty member who's a digital citizen, as a member of my program and my department and my college and the university at large.
Yeah, I really agree with that. I similarly think about digital citizenship through that lens, and I think mostly about inequality and civility. So I think about how do I create spaces where people that might have less access to internet, or they're internationally located, or they're working, or they have a learning disability. What are the sorts of things that I can do that will make it easier for them to navigate the course, or might provide different kinds of materials that might engage them around the same concept differently. And then I really think about civility and trying to get people to not give me the answer that I want, but to give me the answer that they think, and then just engage other people in a productive and scholarly way, as opposed to what we often see now, yelling and mudslinging.
Well, I think everybody's answer was pretty good, and the one thing I would add to it is also making sure we give our digital citizenship citizens the same kind of resources and access to the various facilities and things that the university has that our in-person citizens have. Because this is one of the challenges, is how do we serve these digital participants and get them the tools they need that are just so readily available on campus.
Fantastic. It looks like a big theme, of course, was everyone talking about community and online community. So my question for you is, how does online community influence learning? And this could be online community students to students or teachers to students. And I'll start with you, Dr. Denon. How would you say online community influences learning?
Jeff is picking on me because this is in my research area.
Why not?
Online community is very important because it gives people a sense of being with someone else and being tracked through the learning experience. For students who have a low sense of community, it can be very difficult for them to be motivated to progress through a course. They don't have a good sense of if they are ahead or behind, or if they're stuck on something. Is everybody else stuck on the same thing? It's when you try to solve a problem alone and you get stuck, you just feel more and more alone, and it tends to be more and more difficult. When you have other people working with you, it gets a lot easier. So when we build in that sense of community, that ability for people to connect with each other and to figure out what their collective experiences are of the course, we make a path through learning that makes everything a lot easier for people. Now, what becomes necessary to make that happen then is sometimes to add in the things that seem like they're not entirely academic, like introductions at the beginning to figure out who's in the room, because when we walk into a face-to-face classroom, we don't always take time to do those things, but over the course of the semester, we get to know the girl with the purple bag and the guy with the red baseball cap, because they always have those things, or the one who shows up 5 minutes late with coffee, whatever. We have a sense of the people. And in these online environments, particularly if they're text-based, as so many of them are, we don't have that same sense of community automatically developing just by seeing and hearing the people around us. And that's why it's important. You got to know that there are people there. I mean, really? How many of you want to sit all alone, day after day, in your room, on a computer, just doing coursework? It's not that fun, is it? No.
And Kamasia, I'll come to you with the same question. How does online community influence learning? And this could be students to students interaction, students to teachers.
Gotcha. Sorry. Could you repeat the question? I'm so sorry.
Yeah, no problem, no problem. That's what I'm here for. I have a whole script. How does online community influence learning? And that could be learning from student to student or teacher to student.
Gotcha. So I'm going to go on a basis of like student to student and teacher to student. I feel like community influences learning because it allows, so it like removes the space that allowed for error. So I feel like when it comes to teacher to student, if there's like that gap of like miscommunication, you feel very disconnected, that's when you allow things like imposter syndrome to hit within the students, or you allow them to like be almost afraid to speak up or ask questions, or like, hey, I got some points off of this, why? Like, granted, yeah, they give feedback, but just like, Miss Vanessa said, it's like you're basically isolating yourself and you're just stuck, and it's almost like you're talking to robots. But it's like when it comes to introduction, the face-to-face, or, oh, comment on this person's discussion, I feel like that builds a sense of connection within the students' community where it's like, okay, I know if I have a question, I can ask this person, or it's like, okay, this is what we're supposed to do. But I also feel like when it comes to teacher to student, it's so critical because I know that FSU, we have a lot of resources such as like the counseling center, the case managers, et cetera, but it's like almost kind of disconnected when it's like, say you have mental health, like a situation going on and you need to let them know. It's like, how would you approach that? How do you tell them? How do you make it sure, like, make them understand that, like, hey, I'm trying, I'm doing this? Because when it's in person, it's easier because it's like, oh, you see, I'm talking to a human, I'm talking to this, but it's like, when it's very isolated and all you're getting back is feedback, it's like, am I gonna be judged? Am I gonna get points off? Are they really gonna understand? When it comes to student, like I said, it builds that sense of community, because community is one of the most important things, because nobody wants to feel isolated. Those who say they don't like labels or something like that, or being a part of a community, they're also part of a community that doesn't like labels. And so it's like nobody likes to feel by themselves or isolated, and so it creates like this sense of like, not even like friendship, because I know building friendship within online communities is also harder because it's not face-to-face, there's so many factors. But I feel like it makes people feel almost more connected to the people within the course. Because I'm taking a leadership class because that's my certificate. And it's like one of our first assignments. Okay, introduce yourself, do this. And I'm like, okay, I like this. I like getting to see people like just express themselves to where it's not like, okay, what's the mitochondria for? Answer this in 5 sentences and reply. Because the first thing you're going to say, great job, this was great, I'm so happy you defined it. But it's like when you're actually seeing people talk about themselves, you're like, wow, this is a human being. Now I can talk about myself, and then you see all the replies and people just supporting each other. You're like, wow, like I really have a sense of community. I feel like I belong here. And it makes it feel almost as if like, yeah, I'm meant to be here. I'm meant to do this. I'm meant to be with these people. I'm on the right track. Because regardless, we're going to have to go through that track. But when you feel supported, it makes it so much better.
Awesome, thank you. And of course, Dr. Crow from the Office of Distance Learning. How does online community influence learning on your perspective?
From my perspective, one of the things that we already touched on is the interaction between faculty and students, and then students with each other. We also need to keep in mind the kind of dynamics that are involved with that, because a lot of times if there's a discussion happening and an instructor speaks, in that discussion, it will often stop that discussion. Because at that point, it stops being kind of a discussion of peers, and now it's the authority comes in, makes a statement, and then now everyone is quiet. So from my perspective, it's also important for faculty, as they're teaching these courses, to kind of negotiate that and maybe post sparingly or maybe not at all, but then make sure that you're giving feedback and communicating with them through the various assessment feedback. So you also have to be a good judge on the best place and way to interact with students to facilitate it and not stop it.
Great. Let's move on a little bit. Morgan, and this is in your opinion, let's go for some of the digital citizenship as you defined. In what ways do other students and instructors meet your expectations in being good digital citizenship, or citizens, sorry?
So I'm going to do the opposite of that, if that's okay, because my experience with online learning hasn't been the best. And I think part of that could be that the classes that I took online were STEM classes. So, kind of like you touched, it's hard to create that discussion when you're, discussing fact. It's like, that's true. Yes, I agree. That's true. It's true, sort of thing. Whereas maybe if I had taken a humanities course where we could share opinions and things like that, it would have been a more positive experience. However, my experience was basically, the professor said, get this module done this week. You have a midterm coming up. Don't forget to schedule your final. And that was it. And then, we kind of went about our business. So that was kind of my experience with that.
No problem. I'll go for the same question with Dr. Rollinger, and this would be, in what ways do students and instructors meet your expectations in being good digital citizens?
So that's a really hard one because I'm always struggling with the previous question, which is how do you do community? And as an instructor, how do you feel part of a community as opposed to someone that can interfere and disrupt a community? So I tend to think about principles. So it's like, I want civility. What are the things that I can do for students who have different kinds of perspectives or points of view to make sure that they can air those, but do those in a way that engages material. I want people to have integrity, which for me, that's the part that I constantly struggle with because so much of my time is taken up with dealing with plagiarism and cheating issues. And so it's really hard to try to grapple with all of these things at the same time. I'm trying to be transparent, which is one that I really try to hold myself accountable to. Like, how can I make sure people know exactly what's expected, and how can they see what points are going to be associated with it to the best of my ability so that it's not a surprise if they've lost points because they didn't do X, right? And then just professional interaction. And I think that one's so hard in the digital age because we love to read tone, right? And so even as a professor, I have to kind of remind myself, sometimes it's just a statement, and I'm reading something into it because I'm reading this email at 9:30 at night and I'm tired, and I'm not going to look at that email again until tomorrow after I've had some rest, right? So not only in terms of how we put our emails out there, but how we as students and professors read these emails. So I'm always trying to kind of think about what are the values that I have and what can I do in terms of making sure that I'm living up to my part, and how can I help students do the best they can to live up to theirs.
Yeah, excellent. And Ariana, we'll ask both for you. In what ways do other students and instructors meet your expectations in being good citizens, and how do they fall short of being good citizens?
So I'm actually kind of a veteran when it comes to online classes. I was homeschooled from 2nd to 11th grade, and I started doing Florida Virtual School in 10th grade, so I did 2 years of full online classes, and then also some online classes during college as well. And in order for, or I guess my expectations for the other students is to be fully active and engaged in the material. Like, don't just say something surface level, because if you were there in person, like, you would be less likely to do that as well. There would be more students present there with you. The teacher would be present there with you, kind of grappling that higher thinking out of you than just like, yes, I agree. So there's only so much an instructor can do if the students aren't willing to do the work and put in the effort with the online stuff. But as an instructor as well, my expectation of that is for them to make it engaging. So as Morgan was talking about with the STEM classes, sometimes that can be difficult as a lot of times are just talking about facts. But I do know there are many ways to do it more engagingly, as in like my STEM classes I've taken online. There are ways to where the teacher can put more of the responsibility on the students, so that way it's more sense making in the class rather than just like look it up in your textbook, what's the answer. I always like to think that the best instructors are the ones that talk the least. So, because then they're really forcing us to think for ourselves. And yeah, I think that kind of hits both pros and cons.
Yeah, fantastic. Dr. Denton, I'll go with the same question for you, and that's the pros and cons. How do students or other instructors meet your expectations or fall short in being good citizens?
I find that people meet my expectations best when I tell them what my expectations are, and I'm really clear about it. And I think that is truly essential. I'm in a sense, I'm thankful that nobody has actually said this term yet today, but I'm going to throw it out because it's something that I hear all the time, is this whole, well, they're the digital natives, they're online all the time, they're the experts on all this stuff. And the answer is no. I guarantee you all swipe in the right direction on Snapchat, and I never do. I swipe 3 ways before I get it the right way. However, I also guarantee you that I know the online classroom better than all of you, because I can put it this way, I've been teaching online since the last century. How's that? I'm really not quite that old, but yes, I actually have been teaching online for 20 years, a little more than 20 years now. What I've learned is that people don't know what to do in that setting until you tell them what to do. It's the same as with like you said, with an assignment and how many points you're going to take off. You have to be really specific about what all of these expectations are. I did this by feel for a number of years, and also for research. And then I had this moment that made it all perfectly clear to me, which was when I had a toddler. And I went to a parenting session at my daughter's preschool, and the expert who came there provided everybody with a reminder that with your child, and not just in the toddler years, but as you move beyond that, that rules need to be continuously repeated for them. I don't mean like hard rules like don't hit people, just like the rules of general conduct. Like, when we're in a restaurant, this is the way we behave. When we're at home, this is how we behave. And that they need to be repeated and reminded as you transition from environment to environment continuously. And I was like, oh, this makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? And so when we get into the online class, we remind people or some people who are new, this is what it means to be in an online class, or this is what it means to be in my online class, because mine might be different from yours, and that's okay. They don't all have to be the same. But if we don't state what our expectations are for how often you're going to log in, how you're going to interact with your classmates, how often you're going to interact with your classmates, how about provide some concrete examples as models of, like, this is what I want your discussion posts to look like, because if I just tell you, your posts must be 200 words long. Okay, what are you going to do? Aim for 200 words? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you have a good sense of what you're going to say in those 200 words? No. Would you like an example that shows you how to dig in on the topic, perhaps? Those kinds of things are really useful to students. I found as a faculty member that, I continuously revise them, and they're a little bit different for different classes that I teach, because the learning objectives, the material may be different, the activities are different, but I found that the initial investment in developing your expectations and having them written out for students, and then also being able to provide them in various forms, like a video that people could watch, and having all those concrete examples, the first time around is the hardest, and after that it gets easier. And I think, I've got 2 of my students here, that those things are appreciated by students, because it does give those expectations up front. And so all the bad things that can happen, I find don't happen so often anymore. People ask me, like, you teach online all the time, don't you have like flame wars between your students and people cheating all the time on stuff? And that's a tough one, but I found that reworking assignments helps a lot, and setting expectations, not perfectly. And I don't teach undergrad, so I don't have the problem in quite the same way. But I do get grad students who don't understand fully what plagiarism is, or how to deal with it, or how it can be detected. And so things like using Turn It In as a teaching tool,
that's what
as opposed to a punitive tool for the first assignment, is helpful. Yeah, and then having a discussion about that, and like debriefing what that report looks like with a group of students if you find that you need to do that. All of these extra things that we build in can help support people in these environments that really are not that familiar and not that intuitive.
Right, and Dr. Crow, for you as well, in what ways do other students or teachers, instructors meet your expectations in being a good citizen? In what ways do they fall short?
I teach humanities classes, in particular religion. So I have an interesting scenario where I have to sometimes coach students on what's appropriate ways to talk about religion and what's not. And one of the ways I do that is exactly what you're saying, is I structure the course that the first week what they're doing is they're looking at how the academic study of religion is different from, say, a theological or a personal confessional way. And that way, in how that course is structured, they start to see, oh, I take this objectivity and things like that. And then as discussions go, if I see somebody, more often it's somebody who has a very negative attitude about religion, I message them and say, look, it's totally okay if that's how you feel about religion, but make sure that you don't express that in a way that makes others feel bad that they are religious, whereas you talk about it yourself and things like that. So for me, it's when, after some of that kind of coaching, when they don't get the message, I guess, sometimes, that's when I'm disappointed. But overall, I'd have to say I've been pretty happy with the undergraduate students that I teach and the way that they express themselves. It's also really nice that a lot of the students will talk about their own religious experiences, and that helps foster community, because other people will be like, oh, I'm same thing, or we have similar beliefs, etc. So.
Great. So I'm seeing a lot of themes kind of pop up when we're talking about the core principles: transparency, communication, privacy, integrity, engaging. In some of these that fell short, and Morgan, I'll start with you. How can we improve the falling short part of digital citizenship?
I think just going back to that community that we've been touching on for this panel, that without that community, online learning isn't going to be successful. So, maybe in the STEM classes, creating a group project to make it more interactive, to make it more community-based, things like that. And then I think just personally for me, I felt like the professors weren't approachable simply because, I heard from them maybe once a week. So I think if online professors, while maybe in the discussions aren't as active so that the students can interact with one another, if they're still, posting announcements telling everyone, hey, you're doing a great job, hey, I'm really proud of what you guys have done, keep up the discussions, and providing the clear instructions that you all have been talking about, I think that would, that would have improved my experience quite a bit.
And Kamasia, same question.
Sorry. When it comes to how to approach that, I'm taking a leadership course at the moment, and so I would honestly say that they would have to use situational leadership approach. The coaching method, I'm gonna reiterate on that. But basically it's where you are very directive, but you're also very supportive. I literally dropped a class this semester within the first week because as soon as I got in there, we already had assignments to do, but it was never told to us. It was, oh, you better look on the thing and fix your schedule and make sure that this is due this day because if it's due at 5:05, we're not accepting late work. And I was like, the lack of communication made it where already, as soon as I joined the course, before I even did my attendance, I was like, she's very unapproachable, and I don't feel like she would understand that I have other life things going on. Like, I'm a Care 19 student, so obviously, like, I went to go consult someone and was like, hey, how do you feel about this? And they're like, no, if you feel like, honestly, from the jump, you're not gonna prosper in it, don't take it, because when stuff starts getting hard, you have midterms, finals, studying, all that stuff, things are just gonna pile up on top of you. And if you're in this first week and she's not setting expectations, she's not approaching you guys, and it's just, hey, I sent out an email like a week ago, you should have been got it. If not, ask a peer. It's like we don't even know our peers to ask or who to ask. And also just like the whole like making expectations very clear, because there's been instances, I don't want to focus on the negatives, I'm also going to like focus on a couple positives. There's been instances where it's like, okay, you said like 5 robust sentences. What are some examples? Oh, I just got points taken off because I agreed, but it's like I can't really say anything. I can't. Thanks for putting off the definition. Like that, it doesn't personalize it, but they want personalized. But we don't have any examples that are given to us of how to personalize it. What are some ways? What are some points, some tips, or whatever? But then also, one of the good things that I've noticed about each online class that I've taken, even the one that I left very quickly, I noticed that you could also have a sense of like individuality within it, where it's like you can put like your own personal twist to like certain things. So I've had essays where it's just like, describe yourself, and we're like, how? And it's literally just like 2 pages, just describe yourself, any way, any font, any whatever, just we want to know your story. And I feel like personally, if we were able to read that or like consent, like, hey, I want other people to read this or whatever, it would give us a sense of like, okay, you're this person, you like this, okay, let me email you, are you on campus, let's hang out, let's whatever. and build that stronger sense of connection and just everything within it. But also I feel like support within students and teachers are like one of the most key notes that we all need to hit. Not need to hit, but you know what I mean, like focus on. Because it's like without support, like no matter how evident or how the expectations are put out, if we don't feel supported enough to do it, we're just doing it for the grade and not to actually learn. We're doing it to memorize, pass the test, and move on rather than actually get the curriculum in and want to do what we're doing or want to learn or want to whatever. Because I feel like people also fail to realize that these online teachers, if they leave a mark on you, leave a mark on them, that's a recommendation letter for like grad school or something. But I feel like it's harder to get those from like online teachers because it's like, oh, thanks for taking the class, you passed, all right, I'm gonna rate you and like rate my professor and that's it. And rather than like, oh, how are you, how's your day, oh, you guys are doing such a great job, like how Morgan touched on, like just putting out things like, oh, you guys are doing a great job, I'm so proud of you. It leaves room for error and it eliminates that room for error and eliminates that room to like I said, imposter syndrome to kick in and be like, oh, everyone knows what they're doing, but I don't, whatever. Now, like, your own mind is your own enemy, where it's like, now you're feeling unmotivated to do this, and like your grades start to drop, and it's just like, how do you tell someone that you don't even know, or that you haven't seen, or someone that's not communicating with you, or someone that's not reassuring you, making sure things are good? I'm not saying like every 5 seconds, oh my God, sweetie, you're doing amazing, da-da-da-da, but it's more like, okay, I haven't heard from my teacher besides her posting the announcement. Is she gonna be like, hey, like, yeah, there's feedback on my assignment, but yeah, that's so great, I'm happy you did the assignment. Instead of like, hey, I like your writing style, or hey, like this, or, yeah.
And Ariana, same question, please. How do we improve falling short?
I've noticed in different classes, we've gotten different access to Canvas, so one of my courses, you can really only see the other people, like their names, and then there's not really a way to like go and message the class. And then some of them, there will be a way to message the class or certain people that are in the online community. And I think it's important to make sure that there is a way for the other students to communicate with each other that's not the discussion boards, because if the only way the other students are communicating with each other is like on those formal assignments, they're not really collaborating with each other. I've had a class where one of the other students made a group me because it had all of our information on there. When we signed up for the class, the teacher asked, do you consent to having your phone number put on there? And yeah, so she made a group me with everyone, and then if someone was having an issue with a topic like, hey, does anyone want to work on this assignment together? Does someone get, like, I'm having an issue with this? Like, sometimes people will underestimate how important and influential peer-to-peer interaction is and how much that can actually support you in doing well in the course. And I think that can be one of the main reasons or primary problems with online classes is when you have that dissociation between peer-to-peer when you're only having that formal in-class time. Because if you think about it, when you're in class, students aren't really talking to each other. Like, they're listening to the instructor, they're answering the formal questions. A lot of the discussions about the class happen outside of class in a more informal setting. So I think that informal setting should be more emphasized.
Great. So we talked a lot about in-course and design and learning in the classroom. Dr. Rollinger, I'm going to kind of move this to how this transfers outside of the classroom, because I know a lot of your research goes beyond the classroom as well. How has your experience facilitating and designing these courses, how has it affected your habits as a digital citizen outside the classroom?
I don't think that was on the handout you gave me.
Great question.
That is a great
One
question.
surprise.
So how does that affect my what I do inside? I think they're very related. So I think that it's worked, my research and teaching have worked in conjunction with one another because it really makes me prioritize my values and what I want to do. So as someone that studies groups that I don't always agree with, I'm always thinking about, it's not my job, whether I agree or disagree with a group, to help them in any way or to judge them in any way. My job is to say, here's what we can see by looking at very different cases. The result is everyone hates me that I study, which I've decided I'm comfortable with because I focus on what I value instead of the end result. And I really am not kidding. The groups get really, really mad at me, and oftentimes will cut off my access later, which is why I have to study a different issue. But it's fine because I'm not playing favoritism, which sometimes they will overtly ask for. Like, I've been offered jobs and money and all kinds of incentives if I will say what they want me to say. So it's really been very interesting to think about my work and my interest in inequality and how people challenge authority, and what, as an authority figure, how do I make sure that I'm doing better than what I often see people doing out in the real world?
That seems to align with integrity being one of your big principles.
And transparency.
Right.
So anytime they were offering me incentives, I'm like, no. I would use the ivory tower excuse. I'm like, no, I like to study participation in activism. I don't want to be one.
And Dr. Gray, we'll get your opinion on this as well. How has your experience facilitating, designing online courses influenced your habits as a digital citizen outside the classroom?
Perhaps the best way to think about it for me is designing courses has made me a better teacher, period, and a better at thinking about what works well in person and what works well digitally. Because in online courses, you have to think through the whole course. You have to be very intentional. You have to make the kinds of connections between the material and the assignments, assessments, and lectures, etc. And so in doing that online fully, my in-person classes, I do the same thing. And so instead of just kind of winging classes, I think through the whole arc of it. And then I make a very conscious choice about what I put online and what I don't. And so in the end, I think teaching online and having participated in those kind of opportunities has made the in-person ones better. And yeah.
Great. And Dr. Denon, same question for you as well.
I find that, and this has been throughout my career really, there's been this synergy going back and forth between my practices as an online instructor and my research, which in early days was really specifically on online instruction most of the time. And these days I'm actually looking a lot more broadly at how people engage in knowledge activities often outside of the classroom in online environments, and like doing a big study on teen use of social media. But I find that these experiences and the knowledge that I derive from my interactions in both environments inform each other. So I think what I'm going to say now is going to resonate with some of what you all were saying as well, that being a person and appearing real to people matters. It matters when I'm an instructor, and it matters when I'm a researcher and I'm reaching out to people who I don't otherwise know for these short-term relationships to learn more about them. I don't have to tell them my whole life story, but there are these little elements of being human that we all connect across, and that infusing those elements in our digital communications with other people are really important. They provide those reminders that there is somebody who, when you mentioned tone, like, you know, who may react to your tone at the other end, or who may have different belief sets than you have, but that we all have some commonalities as well, and we can make those connections. And when you make those connections with people, I think that you get your research participants to want to conduct interviews with you, self-disclose more to you. You get your students to want to be on board the learning train and really participate in the class with you. Those elements are are a critical part of the relationship. Again, stating your expectations, it goes back and forth across pretty much every environment. And as I've studied different online communities, and sometimes where I see things like the incivility that happens, one of the things that becomes immediately apparent was that nobody really stated the expectations, or that there isn't a collective group mission that everybody in the group is working toward, and that becomes important. Another thing that I've seen that I think is important to keep in mind, this is something that I've gotten from research, I think really that I've brought back to the classroom, is this idea that people are most of the time just out there doing the best that they can. And sometimes their behaviors may be a little bit puzzling to us. The words that they use may rub us the wrong way or not be the ones that we would have chosen. But if we let a couple of bad interactions, and maybe they're not really bad, maybe they just were a little bit off, but if we focus on those, then it quickly tumbles into being a problem situation. I see this happening when I do research with online instructors and talk to them, where they talk about all the bad and negative things that happen in online classes, but you really get down to it and you find out it's just been 1 or 2 students. It's been a very small percentage of the experience, but now suddenly we've turned our focus from the very positive elements of teaching and learning into the policing of behavior. And nobody likes to live in a police state. If we can turn some of these things around a little bit, I'm not being Pollyanna-ish about it, the negative things do happen, but if we can focus on fostering the positive and then just deal with the negative when it happens and get back to the positive, I think we can have much more productive learning experiences. And that's certainly something that my research participants outside of formal learning environments have provided me with reminders of again and again, because they are almost always these teens who everybody, I realize you all are like still teens, but you're not as old as us on this half of the table. And I find that adults are almost cruel sometimes in the ways that we make fun of teenagers, young adults in their use of social media for things that aren't hurting anybody, that are just part of natural adolescent development. If we're all more tolerant of each other's needs that aren't hurting anybody and give space for those things and honor some of those differences, the whole experience is more pleasant than if we spend all of our time policing the bad that's going to happen.
Excellent. And then Ariana, I'll come to you. There's a lot of principles we're talking about trying to transfer from the classroom to real life. And of course those principles, accessing technology, digital etiquette, forms of online communication, integrity. How have what you've done in course as a digital citizen, how was that transferred to real life? Not that education isn't real life, but.
I think so you're asking just basically how does the skills that we've done in online classes, how does that translate to other?
Yeah, from the frame of like digital citizenship. So from these principles, and how could be it doesn't.
Yeah, so I think how you participate in a class has a lot to do how you're going to participate in other platforms online. So like if you're really one to be in the discussion board, like debating, you're probably that one on Facebook, like writing a novel, debating back, what's in like making your point out to someone who's literally just never going to see your point of view. You can talk to them till they're blue in the face, like it doesn't matter. So I think doing these online classes, because you are expected to be like a respectable digital citizen, then you kind of become more tolerant and kind of just like when you hear something or like read something that, doesn't fully agree with you, and you just have to be like, okay, whatever, like I'm just not gonna say anything, like, or if you do say something, have it be in a more respectful manner than just going off on someone. And that definitely translates to when you read things on Facebook that someone posts and you're just like, oh no. But yeah.
Great. Can we just same question in some of those principles again, accessing technology, digital etiquette, forms of online communication. How is that transferred into non-education environments?
Gotcha.
to me, it's kind of like half and half. Like my influence, like how I am offline, also does come into play how I am online, especially when it comes to classroom. Same vice versa. Personally, I kind of don't like. I'm very well of like code switching. I'm very like prominent in that. However, I refuse to code switch all throughout the duration of an online class because I want them to see me as an individual and have that sense of like I'm a person. Yeah, I made like a grammatical error, but okay, I'm a human. Like I'm just gonna leave it because I don't want like my teachers or me to go to my students like super professionally and be like, "Good evening, this is the discussion board." I'm like, no, like, hey y'all, what's good? Like, come on, like have us all interact with each other how we would interact with each other if we were actually in a classroom. I feel like overall when it comes to like my digital citizenship, how that plays a form of my like day-to-day life, I feel like personally I see people almost like not necessarily like in a different light, but think to myself like, oh, they might be in my class, or because I just don't know, to where it kind of made me a little bit more curious to be like, okay, well, who's actually in my class? Like, okay, I'm reading this about you, but it's like we might never meet, we might never conversate again, where it's like, holy crap, like these are people who are on camp, like they could probably live in my dorm, for example, and I still wouldn't know. It's also made me try to like help people come out their shell when it comes to like discussion boards. So personally, I would try to ask questions to also help fill the 5 sentences. So I would ask them like, oh, you're an education major, what's your concentration, da 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 da, even though our topic is like on leadership approaches and stuff like that. Just try to find ways on how to like maybe, because what I usually do, I just look back at my replies just to see what they said, because I'm usually the one who's kind of like not disagreeing, but always having a different perspective, and that's what they always touch on. They always touch on, oh my gosh, you showed me a different perspective. I never thought of it like that. And so it's like I want to look back and be like, okay, like, is a conversation able to start through this? Because I know they won't get notified of it, but it's like maybe that one day they look and they're like, oh my gosh, I emailed you and da da da. To where it's like, even in person now, I try to not necessarily have people come out of their shell more, but try to get them more comfortable talking about themselves and showing individuality within it. Because in my LDR course, you can be an individual and it's very strong, and that these people, you scroll down, you'll be like, oh, this girl, she's always gonna say this. Not always, but you guys know what I mean. Or like this guy, I know he has very strong viewpoints on this type of leadership, so I can just assume that we won't agree on this, but you know, it is what it is, rather than like STEM courses or like my economics course where it's like, where's the equilibrium? It's like you can't really personalize that, and so it kind of tries to help me make people, I don't even know, for example, just like, hey, come out of your shell, like it's okay, be an individual, like make yourself known, even if you feel like you're little as possible, like, oh, I'm just a like dot on the planet. It's like, okay, but you're here for a reason, and we're gonna talk like let's get a conversation going. And so the whole like digital citizenship, it kind of affects my citizenship outside of the digital realm, because it's like I'm still striving for that sense of community here and there, but I kind of emphasize community a little bit more, especially when it comes to like in the digital realm. But yeah, overall, it's just me trying to build that sense of community. Like, yeah, like, I'm sorry, like, yeah, that's basically it.
No, that's great. And I like how you can kind of identify who the student is that's late with coffee, although it tends to be kind of more in an argumentative way. Morgan, same question.
So one thing that I've taken from the digital classes that I've taken is just the etiquette that you've had. Fortunately, before I went into those classes, I had professors that taught me, you send an email this way, you started off with, good morning, or dear Dr. XYZ, I'm emailing about this, and then you send it off with, have a great day, your name, whatever. But I think beyond, like the structure of that, I've learned that to always kind of remind yourself that there's a person behind that. And I think that in the digital realm, it's easy to be disconnected from that aspect of it, but just reminding yourself that, there's a person that comment on Instagram is going to affect. And even if it's not that person that the comment was directed towards, that it affects, someone can read that, 2 months later, and it could affect them. And whether that's positive or negative, you just need to kind of keep reminding yourself that whatever you put out there, it's going to be there for a very long time. And then a second thing that I've learned is that on online communication, people are a lot more apt to share their opinions because it's like, you know, that person's not in front of you. They feel more comfortable saying that because in a way it's, I suppose, less confrontational because you're sort of removed from that, but just remembering that it's okay to have differences, but just to be respectful in your communication online.
That's fantastic. At this point, we're going to open up questions to our amazing audience or people online. And feel free to, if you want to ask a question to a specific person up here or just in general. If any of you are really passionate about answering that question, go ahead and say, I'll take this one. Any questions? Here you go.
So I've been thinking about digital citizenship in this classroom context versus the sort of everyday life online in the apps on Twitter, you know, whatever. I was actually wondering if any of you have an opinion about what aspects of general social media or general kind of online world would actually make the online learning environment better. Like I was just looking at our hashtag on Twitter and I was like, oh, I don't know who that person is, but I can click on their name and I get information about them from their bio. And I'm like, I can't do that in an online class that I know of. Are there things from out in the general media world that might help improve some of these aspects of connection online and online learning?
So one thing that I would also touch on is the hashtag. I feel like if we had a hashtag that's simple like digital citizenship, FSU or something like that, us just seeing the hashtag, we don't even have to know what it means. As long as we see it and we're like, oh, we have a hashtag, okay. And so when we click it, it's like, oh, there's all these people. Oh, that's that girl in my blank class. Or, oh, I remember them. That's my teacher, actually. And like you builds that connection where it's like, that's a human, this is a person, rather than like someone professional just behind the screen, like, this is due at 11:59, guys, just a reminder. And I feel like one thing that my LDR class does that I really do appreciate from my instructors is that they require, one of our first assignments was upload a profile picture onto your Canvas. After that, say some fun facts about you, do this, and you have to respond. That's not just like agreeing or getting to know, like get to know them. We want you to get to know them and build those relationships. And so that was like one of my second online classes, and I was like, oh, okay, this is new. Like I like this. It builds that sense of like, oh, we are people. And then also the whole like, oh, do you consent to have your number out? I feel like that would be amazing because I've never heard of a group me for an online class. Like I also did Florida virtual school throughout high school, and in the context overall, it's just like FOVS is very, very, very different. Where it's like, okay, you can go at your own pace, you can do this, but also I need you to talk to me on the phone every module and answer some questions. I need you to do this, I need you to do that, I need you to whatever. Oh, here's finally a discussion board, but I want y'all to all answer like the same question and give different feedback, like how'd you get the answer, how'd you da-da-da, rather than just like agree, disagree, or give your opinion. And I also feel like adding videos and not just typing things out would also help contribute to like the whole like this is a person, this is whatever. I feel more comfortable now because I haven't had any teachers like upload videos of, hey guys, this is the thing, or I'm going to give feedback via voice, or I'm going to do whatever. Because when it comes to messages or just text overall, the tone that you read that from, that's just how it's automatically interpreted. If you were to ask that question in an angry tone, if you were to text, I'd be like, oh, she's just chilling. But it's like, if you were to come up and just start yelling, like be extremely upset, I would be like, okay, now I know how to interpret this, now I know how to properly approach this. And so I feel like overall, if we add like text, photographs, like hashtags, just basically basic like fundamentals that all social media platforms kind of share, where it's like hashtags, okay, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, even like Tumblr or whatever, hashtags, okay, profile pictures, okay, there are videos, there's images shared, we could have like memes or something that's just specifically for digital citizenship, or something where it's like, I don't know, that face you make when you forget to upload 5 sentences and you put 4 or something like that. Where it's like, okay, like now it's no longer this strict like professional thing where we feel like we're confined. yeah, where we're like constricted into this box where it's like we have to be this way. We can finally step outside that box and be like, okay, I'm an individual. I want you guys to know this about me. Okay, we're all raised differently. We come from different backgrounds, different religions, different sexual orientations, different everything. Okay, I want to see your point of view, because when it's through like this platform where it's just strictly online and people only know what you post, this is when user engagement really matters, because it's like, okay, we only know what you post, but if you post if you're not engaged and you're just like, yeah, this is my 5 sentences, I'm like, okay, like I don't get to know you, but it makes me not want to know you, because it's like you're not leaving like a breadcrumb trail where it's like, okay, something that I can follow, something that I can get off, like actually like get offline and be like, okay, like now I kind of want to meet you, because like we have those similarities, we have that sense of community, we have that sense of connection where it's like, okay, this is a possible friendship, rather than, okay, this is someone behind a computer here strictly for a grade. So yeah.
I told Vanessa she's gonna have to reply because I've had no luck with doing this social media thing. And maybe it's because I do it as more of an extra credit. So I've done Facebook. It's like find something that's related to class and put it on, our group Facebook page, or share it on Twitter, use a hashtag. And students are really resistant, sometimes because they don't have any familiarity with some of these platforms. Like people have said, is Twitter for free? I mean, how do you do Twitter? Which I because I study this stuff, I just forget. And then some of it is the privacy issues. I don't want to have social media accounts for privacy reasons and other issues. So I'm really curious about what Vanessa says about this, because I've tried and I have not felt like it's been successful at all.
Well, I mean, using actual social media to help facilitate learning experiences brings its own challenge. One of the first things I like to remind people is that when we ask our students to use social media, we are opening up privacy issues, and we're also asking our students to get on a new platform with another username and a password. It will create issues of what's termed context collapse for them if they choose to use the same username and password that they use for other purposes. It will usually just create confusion and inconvenience for them if they try to create alternate usernames and passwords. Sometimes this is worth doing, but I always advise thinking through very carefully why you're doing it before you do it, to make sure that there really is sufficient value added. Sometimes the value added can come in me using the platform and sharing things, and then I could choose something where everybody can follow passively, even if they don't have an account, and they can contribute if they want to. And that tends to work fairly well. It's a shame that a lot of our learning management systems, like Canvas that we have, even though Canvas, I think, talks a fairly good game about being student-centered, and in some ways there are still a lot of instructor-centered features that exist on Canvas, and there are a lot of features that would be nice to add into it, like instant clicking on profiles and bringing up all this other information. But I think there are other ways. We've been doing this stuff for years in online classrooms to help create that more personal touch in there. As you were talking about having videos, it's funny because I was thinking of one of the things I like to do is start off a course with a video that I recorded. We have great recording facilities at ODL. I don't use you for this. And the reason why is that those are very professional and sterile feeling recordings. Really great when I do promotional videos about, wouldn't you like to be an online doctoral student in instructional systems and learning technologies? But if I'm addressing my new class of students, I'm going to say, hi everyone, I'm going to be sitting in my living room probably, just set up there. Hi everyone, I'm Vanessa. I'm your instructor for the next 16 weeks. It's really great to meet all of you. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. And that's how I'll do it, and I'll just, go on, ramble a little bit, talk about the course. What I've been told, the value that comes from that afterwards, is students have said, when I read your text now, I read your smile in the words. And I think, that's good, because then when the tone things come up, people still read the smile in my words. And they know that this is how I speak. And it gives that extra feeling of comfort. Switching it up on tools, using things like Flipgrid, which actually has a Canvas integration on it and allows people to record little videos every once in a while, shakes up the type of interaction. If you do it all the time, it's just a lot of video watching for everybody. But But in small snippets, these things can be really fun and worthwhile. But since the topic of social media came up, one other thing I wanted to say about it is it's important to remember that in social media environments, when people are interacting a lot on these Twitter hashtags or wherever, they are doing it voluntarily. They have chosen, this is something that is of interest to me. This is a worthwhile way to spend my time. I would like to hope that everybody who shows up in my classroom is there because they've declared an interest and this is a worthwhile way to spend their time. But I know that even for those who are there for those reasons, and not just to get 3 credit hours, their reasons for being there don't always align perfectly with my learning objectives. So I'm going to go back to what Dr. Crow said about his class initially, and getting everybody's ideas out and helping them connect their own personal experiences to the subject matter, I think is important. And I think it can be done even in those STEM courses, that we can maybe take a little step back from our traditional instructional shoveling of facts and figures to students and say, so what is it that you plan to do with your career, and how does this content relate to it? How do you think you're going to use it? Oh, you don't know yet? Well, why don't you spend this week investigating online? Find some experts, post to some Twitter hashtags looking for experts if that's it, read news stories if that's it, and report back to us how this subject matter is going to relate to your life. Now I've made a connection for you and what you're learning in the course, and you're going to share it with your classmates. It takes maybe a week of time to do that, and it can be a secondary activity that's happening during that week. But afterwards, all these ideas have been pulled together, and we all know each other a little bit better. We know each other's interests, reasons for being there, and the students see the relevance in the material, and that makes a huge difference.
Well, thank you so much, and that's our time. Please thank our wonderful panelists that we had today. And fantastic. Thanks for coming to the session. If you have any questions, some of them might be around. I'll be around as well. So thanks a lot.